Hello plant lovers, Matthew in Melbourne, welcoming you back to my channel. And today I thought I'm going to talk to you about Paphiopedilum orchids because, well, firstly, this is still in bloom, but that's another story. But because they're all putting forward their new growth, and I thought it'd be a good idea to show you just what that means and what the implications are and why you need to promote new growth on your Paphiopedilum. I made a care video, which I will link up here, which gives a bit of basic care for Paphiopedilums, but in a nutshell, they're fairly low light. They have no pseudobulbs, so they need a little water often. And I think for me, a good reference point for that is about the amount of milk that you would put into strong tea, if that's clear enough. But the basics are on the other video, so do have a look. But firstly, I just have to show you this. Now, this is a Paphiopedilum called, and I'll put the name below, Duo de Citron. 2 lemons. And what I've discovered is that it is a sequential bloomer up this stem, and this is the last of 3 flowers. The first one, plant lovers, appeared in July last year, mid-lockdown in Melbourne. And look, it is basically the end of January 2021, and look, it is still going strong. I can't believe it. Anyway, so Paphiopedilum Duo de Citron is a great orchid for the cost per wear analysis, so do yourself a favor. But anyway, what we're going to talk about is new growth, because on a lot of Paphiopedilums, the flower comes from the center of the monopodial stem, and often that stem won't reflower. So what you have to do is encourage new growth to get a new monopodial stem, which will give you a flower in successive seasons. So that's what we're looking at today. Okay, so first cab off the rank is this one. Look at the color of the leaves. Aren't they just extraordinary? As a house plant, it just is quite beautiful without the flower. This one bloomed for me in late winter, early spring, and you can see it in the video up here. And it is Ruby Leopard crossed with Black Jazz crossed with Firefighter. So that is a complex little number. I'll put the name below. Anyway, it flowered very happily, and I will come in and show you the detail. But as you can see, there is the remainder of the flower stem, and there quite clearly is the monopodial stem. Now, I have only had this for 1 flowering season, so I'm not quite sure what is going to happen next, whether this is ultimately going to die off or whether it will have the capacity to reshoot from this stem again. However, what we do have growing in there, which I will come in and show you in more detail, is a new growth. So what these orchids do is essentially a bit like bromeliads. They'll send up a pup, which then grows into a mature plant, which will then flower. And that's what you need to encourage with your Paphiopedilum. So I've shown you a close-up of this one. Now this number here is Paphiopedilum niveum, which sounds like a face cream, but it's not. This is a species Paphiopedilum. Now, as you can see, it already has kind of multiple crowns, we can call it, and it is also sending up new shoots underneath. Again, the aim of the game is to get these new growths to mature so that next year they are capable of flowering. Again, I've only really had this for 1 flowering cycle, so I'm not sure whether this orchid can produce multiple crowns, as it looks like it's doing now, which then means it's going to be capable of multiple flowers simultaneously. So we'll wait and see, but either way, it is important to promote those new growths. And then lastly, Paphiopedilum Duo de Citron is also doing the same thing, and we have a new growth coming out here, which I presume is going to take the place of this one as it ages and possibly dies. The whole Paphiopedilum life cycle is still a little new for me because I haven't really had them for longer than a year, but I'm very pleased that they've all got new growths. According to the literature, they should be capable of flowering because the plant itself is mature. So the idea is that you get the new growth to mature in a 12-month cycle, which means it will be ready to flower. Watch this space on that front. So you might remember I also made a video about these 2. This is the one that's the Ruby Leopard Mega Mix. 2 identical plants. This one I have kept indoors all the time, and this one spent its first 6 months outdoors through winter to see just how cold tolerant it was. And although they are cold tolerant, it doesn't love the cold. As you can see, this one thrived and bloomed. This one is still alive, but it didn't flower. But the interesting thing is, because it hasn't flowered yet, there is no new growth on this one. because the flower is yet to come. And I imagine this is going to flower this season, which will mean the flower will start to appear in winter. Its cousin, however, that did flower, is producing the new growth, and ultimately that new growth is going to replace this plant as this one ages, and this becomes the flowering center. So that, I think, is the process with this one. We'll have to see. Either way, I was a little bit nervous that it had flowered and then there was nothing going on, but we do see the new shoot there, so I'm very happy. And in terms of making that new growth happen, it is really about providing them with regular Paphiopedilum care, which means filtered light, not too strong. These do get the tiniest bit of early morning light. This room is actually east facing, so they get a nice little splash of very early morning light, which isn't strong. They're then in indirect light that isn't that bright. It's not the darkest room on earth, but it is certainly the darkest place where I grow any orchid types that I grow here in Melbourne. And as I've said before, I am not going to put these outdoors. You can put them out in summer as long as it's sheltered and protected, and they're not being rained on, but I'm not going to overwinter these. And what I've decided to do is just grow them indoors all the time, because they just seem to thrive more for me in Melbourne. Because there's no pseudobulb on these, they can't store water and nutrients. So you kind of do have to treat them like you would a normal houseplant, which means fertilizing and watering them all year. Obviously in winter you dial that down because you don't want to get them over wet because the roots will rot. Likewise in summer, when there is much more ambient heat, you then need to ramp it up slightly, but again, don't overwater it. And a touch test is always the best idea. They should always err slightly on the drier side, and if you can just kind of wiggle your finger in, you should be able to go a little fingernail depth, which is what, it's about 1 centimeter or about 1/4 of an inch, and just see how dry it is. Don't let the thing dry out completely, but don't keep it sopping wet. So it shouldn't really be wet to the touch unless you've just watered it. There we are, plant lovers, and just look at that fabulous flower on the Duo de Citron. I just can't believe that this has been in bloom, continually in bloom, different flowers, but the same flower spike, since July last year. That's 6 months. It's extraordinary. Anyway, so if you can find a Duo de Citron, you really must, because it's great value and it is sending out lots of shoots. So I am hoping that I will get another flower spike from this shoot in the new year. And then in other faff news, I of course bought myself some more seedlings because I was so thrilled with the results I had from the others that I bought more seedlings. Seedlings are a great way to increase your orchid collection because they're inexpensive. You have, well, comparatively inexpensive. You've got to have the patience, obviously, to see it through, but Paphiopedilum mature relatively quickly. Now, I would imagine that possibly next year I could even get a bloom from this, if not definitely the following year. So I would imagine that this is probably getting on for its 2nd year of growth. So maybe next year I'll get a flower. This little baby is still a little bit small, but nonetheless, they take up no space. So don't be afraid of getting seedlings, plant lovers. And often with Paphiopedilums, it is the cheapest way to go, and you can get them on eBay or through orchid sellers. But there you go. So I have increased my collection because they were so easy and they love this climate. It's essentially an indoor plant for a temperate house. There we are, plant lovers. Thank you for watching my little Paphiopedilum update. Check out the other video, which has a bit more in-depth care and watering and fertilizing and medium information. I look forward to all of these producing wonderful new growth for the new year and flowering subsequently. I'll definitely keep you up to date with that. And thank you for watching. Thank you for hitting like and subscribing. Thank you for asking a question, which I probably won't be able to answer because, plant lovers, I am an amateur here in Melbourne trying to figure out what works best for me in this environment, which is why I'm making these videos, to share with you the knowledge that I found about what orchids and other rare plants work in this environment for me. There we go. Thank you for watching, and I look forward to seeing you next week with something else.